So hey guys, how's it going on? Welcome back to a brand new episode. And today in this one, we are going to learn about WebSockets. So in this episode, we will be building a simple chat application, a public chat application where anyone can send the message only if they have access to this URL. So right, he can send in the message and let's open this in another window so that I can show you effectively. So I'll just open it here. So we have this guy here and this one here, and now let's just send in a message from here. Hello there, and I'm just hitting on enter, and you'll see it will be updated everywhere. So it will be added here as well without any reload, and this will happen automatically because we are using something called as WebSockets, which is the main use of it. Like any changes in the database which we want to capture, we can directly capture them without reloading the website and render it in the front end as we need it to be. So this is a public chat with infinite scroll as well. Like as I scroll above, it will load the rest of the chats, something like that. You can see now all the chats are loaded. So that is how it is going to work. So let's just quickly get started with this episode and start building this simple yet effective chat application using WebSockets. And here we are on our VS Code, and I have opened a directory called chat app in VS Code. So let's just quickly create a directory called server, which will contain all our backend code. So first let us set up the backend and then we can move on to the front end. So cd server and then npm init-y to set up the package.json, and then I would like to install some packages. So npm I, and then let's just do express.env cors mongoose http. If you need anything else, we can always install them. So for now, let's go ahead with these, and this will create a node modules directory for us. And as it installs them, let's create our index.js, which will be our main entry file, and let's set it up. So const express equals to require express, and then const http is equals to require http, and then const dot env equals to require dot env, and then we can do const parse equals to require parse, and then we can do dot env dot config, and after this let's create the app. So const app equals to express, and that's it. Now we can do app.use and then cors, and here we will do app.use express.json. We will create the server later on. Let's just add a base route. So app.get on slash request.response will send a hello world just for testing this, the base route, and then we will create a server now. So const server equals to http dot create server from this app. All right, and then we'll say server dot listen to the port 3001. all right, and give me this callback function. What it does is basically does a log. So we can just do log, and then we can say server is up and running on port 3001. That is it. Let us save, and we are good to go. Now we can test this thing. So node index.js, and you see server is up and running on port 3001. So if we come here and go to localhost 3001, we see hello world, which is just perfect. So now let's proceed with the rest of the stuff. So what is the next thing to set up? Let's set up something called as a chat model. So in the server directory itself, I'll create a new file called as chat model.js. Alright, now within this chat model, we will have the structure of the chat, the schema which is to be stored in the database, right? Okay, before creating this model, there is one more important thing which we must do, which is the database setup. So let's create a new file called db.js, and in here we need mongoose. So const mongoose is equals to require, and then we'll get these mongoose, and after this we'll just do mongoose dot connect, and then we'll do process.env dot mongodb URI, and then what we are going to do is, 1 second, and here we have to use dot then, and then within this we will have a callback function, and in this callback we can do console.log mongodb connected, and after this callback we can use something called as catch to catch if there are any errors, so mongodb connection error and then error. Now we are done with this. Now in the dot we have to create a .env, and we need to paste our like the MongoDB URI. Now in the previous video I have also teached you how to actually get the MongoDB URI, and I have also uploaded a short, so you can just check that out. I will add that in the card or in the description. You can just directly get it from there. And this is the MongoDB URI I saved. We can just paste it up here, save it like this, and hit save, and then close it. Alright, that is all we need to do. Now db.js is done. Now in the index.js we need to one thing, that is we need to import this database, right? So as soon as we create the app, we're going to say let's say db connection in here, and then let's do require, and then /db. That's all. Now when we run this, we will see something like server MongoDB connected without any errors, just fine, right? So we have our MongoDB now. Now coming to this chat model, what we can do is, let's say const mongoose equals to require mongoose, and then within this what we are going to do is we are going to create something called as a chat schema. Now this will have a few things, so new mongoose dot schema. Now within the schema, the first thing it will contain is a message, a text message basically. So for the type we will have string and required will be true, and after this we will have a timestamp, like the time at which the message was made. So we can do something like type, and the type of it will be date, and it will also be required. So let's give it a default value instead, which will automatically create a default value at which time it is like stored. All right, after this what we will do is we will add something like index, here we can say index, and then within this index we can add something like expires, and add here 604800. Now what this will do is it will basically delete the message automatically after a week of time. So now we can just export it. So module dot exports dot chat model equals to mongoose dot model, and into this the name will be chat, and then chat schema, right? I think we are good with this. Now after this we will need to have something called as chat controller, which will have the functions related to the application. There are only two functions we need. One is get chats and one is to post a new message, right? So let's create something called as a chat controller.js. Now within this chat controller, the first thing we will need is a chat model. So let's import it. So const chat model equals to require, and then /chat model. That's it. And after this, let's create a function called module dot exports dot get chats. All right, and in here we can just say async. It will take a request comma response. So we can just do remove this to the request comma response. And in here what we can do is we will use something called a strike catch block for error handling. In the catch we can just basically say response dot status dot 500, which demonstrates internal server error, and we can just send in this error, or we can send in message and make this something like error fetching chats. Alright, hit save and it will be done. Now what I want to do is within this try block, let's simply use something like const, and we will have two parameters to like fetch the number of chats as per pagination. Like at once we will only want to fetch the first 10 initially, and then we can fetch the next 10 and so on. Alright, we have this request dot query. From the query parameters we will have them. After this we are going to get a num. We will have to convert them to num. So skip num is equals to parse int skip. Similarly we are going to have const limit num is equals to parse int, and then in here we will pass in the limit. After this we just need to find the chat, so const chats is equals to await, and then from the chat model we just need to do find all the chats, to which we will add functions like second. To format it we can do something like this, dot find and then dot sort. We will sort based on the time the messages came, so we will say timestamp and set it to -1, which states for descending order. Alright, and then we will skip the first skip num chats, and then we will limit to the limit num. So basically this is what we will do. Limit num, that is all. And now we can do some more things, like we need to fetch a few more information to send in the API response. So the first thing is we need to count the total number of sets. So we can do something like total chats chat model dot count documents, and in the response what we need to do is response dot json. We'll be sending a JSON response, obviously. So the first thing we'll be sending is all the chats we fetched, and then the total count. So the total is going to be this total chats, and then we will have a skip, like how many are being skipped, and then we have our limit to be the limit num, and then we will have has more, whether there are more or not. So skip num plus limit num should be less than total chats. In that case it will be true, otherwise false. Alright, so now we have the get chats ready, and now after this what we are going to do is we need another one, so which will be to post the message. So module dot exports dot post chat. Now this will be a similar thing. Now here also we will use the try catch block for error handling, and the same thing here. Let's copy this, paste it in here, and then error posting chat message and fine. Now in here what I'm going to do is simply say const new chat is equals to new chat model, and we will pass in all the information from the body. So we just need to pass in a message, nothing else. So we'll just say request.body, and then we will just save this. So await this new chat dot save, and after this we will just return it. So response dot status to be 201, saying it's okay, and then we will send in this new chat as the JSON response. Now we are done with the post chat. We can remove this basically. Alright, I see some issue here. Can reject it. Alright, now it's properly formatted. Now we need to create the router so that we can access both these functionalities and then we can quickly test them out. So let's create a new file called router.js, and for this let's import the router functionality from Express. So require Express, and then let's get this chat controller as well. Const chat controller equals to require, and then the dot slash chat controller. So after importing the chat controller, we need to create the router. So const router is equals to router, and router.get on slash chats. I want you to get the chat controller.get chats, and for router.post slash chats, chat controller.post chat, and we export the router. Now hit save, and then we go to the index.js to make this router work. So all we need to do is come here. So here we can say something like app.use for the slash API require this router, and we are good now. Now what we can do is we can test these routes. So let's close this once, run it again, open Postman to test it out. Now if you can see, this is an example of localhost 3000. So let's make it 3001. Hit send, and you can see, so I have basically connected the database which I have shown you in the demo. So these are the messages from there. So this was the most recent one which I typed in the demo, right? So that is it. So if I can do skip the first 10, it will give me the next 10 chats. So these are basically the older ones. So, and talking about the post request, we can do the same. So in the body I'm expecting only a message, nothing else. So we send let's send XYZ, and then let's click on send, and you can see the message has been saved and we can see its data. And if we come here, set the skip to 0 again, we should able to see that one again. So hit on send, and you can see XYZ right here. So that is how so basically the requests are working right now. Now we can work on the WebSocket. Let's create the WebSocket, and then we can move on to the front end as well. So we are here. Let's close all these files. Let's create a new file called as socket.js, right, in here itself. So let's just say socket.js. All the setup will be here. So now what we need to do is, let's do const WebSocket equals to require WebSocket. Now we also need to install this package, so let's close this for now. So clear npm ws, this is the package for using WebSockets. And then we also need mongoose because that is the database we are using. So const mongoose equals to require mongoose. Now guys, this part is important for you because this is the main WebSocket setup which we are going to do. And now let's get the chat model as well. Chat model require dot slash chat model, right? After this, let's create a function called setup WebSocket, all right, which will take a server and does the setup. So first thing, we will have a WebSocket server is equals to a new WebSocket dot server, which will take this server and create a new server for us. All right. Now in here, we'll do. Now this is all this function does basically. All right. Now what we can do is we can use something like mongoose dot, one second, mongoose dot connection dot once the connection is done, and we'll say if it is open, in that case we will have a callback function. Now what does this callback function does is, first we can do a log for testing, so we can just simply say mongodb connected for the WebSocket, and after this log what we can do is we can do something called as changing the stream. So here we'll say const change stream equals to chat model dot watch. Now this will keep on watching for the new incoming things, the changes on there. So we can turn on this change stream, so we will say on, and on, if there is any change, what we will do is we will capture the change that is happening and we'll do something with it. So I'm going to create a new message, so const new message is equals to change dot get the full document to me, and now I want to broadcast this particular document. So I will basically, what I'll do is I'll broadcast this document to the clients whoever are connected. So I'll say wss dot clients dot for each client. What we will say is if the client dot ready state, if his ready state is equals to WebSocket dot open, if his thing is like open, if the socket is open, in that case what we'll use is we'll use the client and then we will send a response. Basically what we can do is json.stringify, and in here we will pass in a few details. So we can do something, pass in something as type, which will be a new message, that will be the type, and after the type we will have the payload of the message, and in the payload we will have this new message, right? I hope this much part is clear. I don't know why, but we see some errors. Yeah, so we just need a curly braces here, so let's remove it, let's put them in and hit save. We are good to go. And if we add curly braces here, somewhere we are missing a bracket. Basically we can have this one here, this one here. Okay, we are basically missing this guy. No, yeah, that's fine. So once we have done this, now after broadcasting this message, so coming here we can say now this WebSocket server dot on, and whenever there is a connection we'll get the WebSocket, and within this let's first make a log, and then we can say something like client connected to the WebSocket, and after this we can do something like WebSocket dot on whenever it is like closed. In that case call this callback function, and we will just say log, and here we'll say client disconnected from the WebSocket. Hit save. I think there is some error. Let's recheck these changes. I see this. Yeah, I think everything is right. Okay, we will need this one. Yeah, now what we can do is simply export this service as well. So module dot exports equals to, let's pass in the setup WebSocket function which we can use. So now it's all good. Now the socket.js setup is done. Now basically we can set this up in the index.js so that it will also start. Alright, so once creating the server, we can import this setup WebSocket here. It's automatically imported like this, and then we'll just call this and then pass in the server. Right, now the WebSocket is ready for our application. Now we can start building the client. And here I have created a basic White.js plus Tailwind application. During the setup, I have added the link in the description for this tutorial. It's basically a short video I have previously recorded. You can use that for reference. So right now it contains some files. Let's remove all the rest of the styling and keep only the Tailwind CSS. And then in the app.jsx as well, we will remove everything. And then we will remove this one as well. Hit save. And in here, let's add an h1 and just say hello world and keep it as it is. We can remove this use state. We can remove all this. Hit save. Come to app.css. We are basically not using it, so we can even remove this file. So all good. Now, so within this app.jsx, for that let's just start the server so that we can test it. And here we have hello world, just right. And we can close this now. Good enough. Now what we are going to do is, in here, let's create a div element. Now within this div, we will have an h1 which will basically say anonymous chat. And after this anonymous chat, we will have a component called as chatbox. We haven't created that component just yet. We'll just save it for now like this and comment it out. And if you check, we have it. Right, now let's add some stylings to this guy. So I'll just going to say class name, and then I'll say text to be white and text to be to Excel, and then the font will be semi bold, and then the margin bottom, the difference from the chat box, will be a 4. Now for this div, we will add some background colors and other stuff and do some centering as well. So I'll just do flex and then justify to the center, and then items to the center, which will send it basically to the center of the screen. And then flex call, I want the column direction, and then height will be the screen, fixed height. And then bg will be gray. Instead of gray, let's have a gradient, like gradient to bottom we will have, and it will be like from blue 500 to indigo 600. If we hit save and check this out, we see something like this. Now we are seeing a different color, so I think there is a spelling mistake. So now if we hit save, now all good. Now it's looking just fine. Now what is the next thing we will do is simply create the chatbox component to work with it. So let's create a few components within the source directory. I'll create another directory called components, and within this components we will have 3 components. The first one is the chat box, the main container for the chat, and then we will have something called as a chat input .jsx, and then we will have something like a chat messages.jsx. We will have these 3. Now for coming to the chat box, we just use rfce, and then in here we will need to have those 2 components. So the first thing we will have is the chat messages. So I'm going to do this, hit save for the chat in rfce, hit save, and then here we will do chat messages auto input done, and then similarly we will have chat input. Alright, now for this div we will have a few stylings. So class name is going to be bg white. We will have the white background, and then we will give it a basic rounding, the border radius, and then let's give it a shadow of, let's say, XL, and then let's give it a width of 11 by 12, and then maximum width will be medium, and then overflow, let's make it hidden. Alright, now we should see something. So in the app.jsx, let's uncomment this, and this is what we basically see right now. So I think basically the issue is because we haven't imported this chat box. So right, while testing, I commented these guys out. If we hit save, cool, we see something now. Now let's create some API functionalities. So what we are going to do is going to VS Code, and now in the source directory I'm going to create another directory called as API, and now in here we will have three files. The first one will be getchats.js, and the second one will be something like postmessage.js, and the third one will be basically here, right, the socket client.js. So first let's work on the get chats. Before we work on these, let's create a .env, right? .env. Then within this .env we are going to have a few things. Now the first thing will be our API base URL. Now because we are using white.js, we have to say white API base URL, and it is basically localhost 3001. That is what we are using. And in the router, if you remember, while setting up the router, we have added base route, which will be API, and after this we will also have a WebSocket URL. So here we can say WebSocket URL. Now it will be something similar, so we can just say this much, but instead of this we will just have this much, and in place of HTTP we will have WS. Now this is the URL for the WebSocket, and the API base URL are done. So let's use some package called as Axios for making API calls. Now it's widely used, so it is super cool. So we can just say npm I Axios, it will be installed. Now let's import it. So import Axios from Axios, and after this we will create a function called get chats. Now async. Now in here we will get two parameters. One will be the skip. By default it will be 0. If passed, it will take that value, and then we will have a limit. By default I'm setting the limit to be 10, and as usual this is going to be an arrow function, and in here we'll have a try catch, and if there's an error we will simply say console.error, and then here we'll say error fetching chat messages, and then we will throw this error, whatever is coming up. And now in this try block what we are going to say is const response. Okay, yeah, we are basically right. So here you can say we are saying const response await axios.get byte API base URL, perfect, and the slash chats is the route which we had, and then the params which are being passed are skip and limit. Now we basically return this response.data, and that is fine. Now we can basically export this. So export default get chats, hit save, and this function is ready. Now what we need is we need the post message function so that we can create the API to post it as well. So import Axios from Axios, and then similarly we will have a const post message, and error posting chat message, all good. Response await axios.post, and here we will get a message here, and axios.post white API base URL and then slash chats, and in the body we are passing in this message like this. Now all good, and we can just basically return this response to data, which is basically the message which was sent after being saved in the database. We get that. Now the next important thing will be the socket client. Okay, now coming to the socket client, here we are going to have a few things, right? So initially let the socket be, let's say, null, and then we will have a listeners to the socket. So initially the listeners are going to be an empty array. All right, now let's create a function, export function. The name will be connect WebSocket. All right, now in here we'll say if the socket exists, if the socket is already connected and not null, and socket dot ready state is equals to WebSocket dot open. In that case we will basically return the socket, whatever there is, return it. Otherwise we will make a connection. That is what it is. If there is a socket, just return that socket, but if not, let's create a socket. So ws url will be equals to import dot meta dot env dot white ws base url. After this we'll say if by chance we don't have the WebSocket URL, some basic error handling, in that case throw new error, and in this error we can say WebSocket URL not defined or something else as you wish, but something similar. So now we'll say socket is equals to new WebSocket, and then we'll say ws url, right? After this we will have socket dot on message. We will see an event, and in here we will have something like let date, not date, actually data, and then we can use the try catch block, and within this catch if there is an error it will basically return, but if there is no error, what we are going to do is we will say the data we got is that, parse it, whatever data we get, just parse it. So parse, in this we'll pass in event.data, just like this. And now after this try catch block, once they are completely executed, what we can do is listeners dot, for each of the listeners we will have this callback. We will make this callback on the data, and once this on message is done, what we are going to do is socket dot on close. If there is a close, what we are doing is we will make a set timeout to like reconnection request, to make a reconnection request. So here we'll say set timeout. So in call this connect WebSocket function again in, let's say, 2 seconds, so 2000, and just like this. And once this is done, we can return the socket. Now we have the connect WebSocket functionality. Now we need two more functions, one to subscribe to the messages and one to unsubscribe to the messages. So we'll say export function subscribe to messages, pass in the callback, and in here we'll say if not listeners dot includes. If we don't have this callback function included, in that case listeners dot push this callback. That is basically it. Alright, and the other function will be export function unsubscribe from messages. So it's basically just removing this listener. That is all we are doing. So now the socket client is also ready. This is ready, this is ready. Now let's work on the chat input first, and then we can work on the other components as well. So basically in this chat input we will have a small form which will have an input for text and the submit button. So within this form we don't need any action, so cool enough. Now in this we will have an input element and then a button type send, submit I mean. Now this is cool. In this button, now good. For now let's just say send. Let's check it out. Cool enough. Now let's first of all let's style the form first of all. So let's just say class name, and in here we'll give it a padding of 3, and then let's make it flex items to the center, and then let's create a gap of 2, and then let's have a border at the top, and then border color, border gray 100, right? And whenever we're submitting this form on submit, we'll call a function called handle submit. And for now let's do const handle submit equals to this much, and here we can do e dot prevent default. This will prevent the page from being reloaded. Now we have this much. Now in the input, so if you see it, cool enough, it's centered. Now for this input we have the type to be text, and then the placeholder will be type your message, and then let's give it a class styling as well. So I'm going to say flex grow, which means it's going to grow as based on the window size, and the padding to be 2.5, and then I'm going to make it rounded completely, and then let's give it a background of gray 50, almost white, right? And then give it a border color will be gray, slightly darker, so we'll just say gray 200, and then whenever it is focused, we'll say outline to be none, and then focus, on focus the ring, we'll set a ring to 2, and then whenever it is focused we can also give it a color, so ring indigo 200. And then one more thing, we can make the border transparent as well, so focus, whenever it's on focus, so border will be transparent. Now we should see just perfect. Now what we are going to do is, in here we will use a use state to add some value to it, right? So let's get a value, it will be input, and then on change we will call a handle input change function, and it will be like disabled if there is a loading state. Now this loading is basically the API loading or WebSocket loading, you can consider it something like that. We will do something similar for the button as well. So first thing, the type is button, type is submit, and then let's give it a class name. Styling will be similar, so BG indigo, and then we will give it something like 600, and then over BG Indigo 700, slightly making it darker, and then text white, and then padding to be 2.5, similar styling, so px4, rounded full, and then transition, we will say colors. This will make the hover effect little transitioning, and then we'll just say duration 200. We have this much. After this, we will have this button disabled when the state is, and the loading state is true. Alright, and in here we are going to do one thing. We will change the state based on loading. Like if we are still loading, we will have dot dot live, which means it's sending the response, and then we'll have the send. Save. Right now we might have errors because we haven't defined any of these. Now let's define them. So in here, what we're going to say is const input comma set input is equals to use state, and the initial state is going to be empty. And coming to the loading, we will have the loading and set loading. It's basically going to be false initially, so I don't see what is the error anymore. Okay, we can see handle input change is not defined, so we need to have it. So const handle input change will be just this much. Hit save, and you see now we have the send button. This type your message input perfectly fine. Now we need to do something like the API integration. So in this handle submit function, what we'll say is if input dot trim is like empty, in that case return, and then set loading to be true, that the message is being sent, and then we will do the try catch block of making the API call. Alright, if there is an error, let's just say console.error for now, and then this much, and then we will have a finally block as well, and in this we will say set loading to false again, and then set input to empty as well. So try. What we are going to say is we'll just say await and use the post message function which we created, to which we will just pass in the message which is typed. We don't need to pass in the message because the variable name is input, so we will say input. And to make it working properly, we need to make this function async. Just perfect. Now I think everything is sorted. Now if we come here, reload the page, I don't see any errors. Let's send in a new message like you are cute, something like this, and then hit on send. Yeah, I think the response is sent. Now if we check in here, okay, could not send request. I think the backend is down because we haven't started it basically. So what we will do is cd server and then node index.js. Perfect. So it would not also work. So again, sending you are cute, and then click on send. Now if we check it, we'll see this, but the message is not being sent. I don't know why. If we check here, we have everything properly. Let's try reloading the page and open the network tab. Right, let's reload it and let's send this. Okay, no message is being sent. I don't know why. Alright, the post message is not imported. We'll have to import it first. So to import it, we can just simply say post message from // API and then post message. Now we can try you are cute. It's sent, and this time we see something. You can see it is making the request to this one, and if we test it out here, you are cute. Now that is just awesome. Now let's work on the final component, which will be the chat messages. Let's do go to the chat messages component and basically work on it. What else will we do? So the first thing is, let's import the get chats function. So import get chats from /API/get chats. And after that, we will also need the connect to WebSocket function, the connect WebSocket function from the /API/socket client, and we will also need something like this subscribe to messages and unsubscribe from messages. Yeah, so these are the basic imports. After that, we will have to create some use states here as well. So let's import use state. And coming to the variables, let's have const messages and set messages. This will basically be a array of messages, right? And then we will have const skip and then set skip. Initially it will be 0, and then const as more, and then set as more. Initially it will be true, and similarly we will have the loading state as well. Initially it will be false, and then we will also need to have something called a use reference hook, which will be used to like load whenever we scroll above, something like that, right? So for that we will have something called as const container reference is equals to use ref, and we'll pass in null. And similarly we will have const first load equals to use ref, and it will also be, now it's basically be true. Fine. Now once done with this much, we need to make a function to like fetch the messages from the database. So let's create a function called const fetch messages. This will basically the async function to which we'll pass a custom skip. Let's skip those many elements and give me the rest, something like that. And in here we'll say if the state is loading or it does not has any more elements, in that case return, and then otherwise set loading to true and do the rest of the process. Okay, in here we'll have a try catch block, and in the try we will first get the data. So const data equals to await get chats, and to this we'll pass in our custom skip and the limit, which will be 10, which is a constant value. And then we need to get the elements, and then make them reverse, because we want the latest message to be at the bottom of the screen, right? So what we can do is const ordered messages will be equals to, these are the messages which we have, data dot chats, and then we basically want to reverse them like this, right? After that, if the custom skip is like 0, in that case set messages to these ordered, but if not, in that case we will have to use the reference, right? The container settings, etc, etc. So we will have const previous height is equals to container reference dot current dot scroll height. That is it. After this we will have set messages to this, the previous order will be there to that, like we are appending the new set of messages which are added before the older ones. That is what is happening here. And then after the set messages we'll say request animation frame, which will have a callback something like this. And in here what we are going to do is, if the container ref dot current, if it exists, in that case we'll say const new height equals to container ref dot current dot scroll height, and then container ref dot current dot scroll top. From the top we want it to scroll below. We can modify this from the top. It will be equals to the new height minus the previous height. Alright, once we have requested this animation frame, what we are going to do is, we'll see if not of data dot has more, if after the new request, if the has more is like coming to be false, or data dot chats dot length is less than the limit, which will be 10, in that case set has more to be false. And after this we'll set the skip value to be the current custom skip plus data dot chats dot length, right? And if there is any error we will just do console dot error fetching messages and this, and then finally set loading to false. I think we are good to go. But there is some bracket issue or something. That's all good. Now after this we basically need to call a use effect so that we call the first load of messages. So for that let's have the use effect snippet, and it will be basically called as soon as the component loads up, and then we will just call the fetch messages from 0. Initially the custom skip is going to be 0. That is all. Can remove this, right? After this, after fetching these messages, we also need to connect to the WebSocket. So we will call the connect to WebSocket function. After that, const handle socket will be a function which will get the data, and then in here, as soon as this function is called, we'll first check data dot type, and if the type is a new message, if the type is new message and there is some payload there, and data.payload exists, in that case what we are going to do is set messages and append that to the previous ones. And once we have set the new messages, we can say if the container ref dot current, if it exists, in that case const scroll top, and then the scroll height, and then the client height. Let's get these three guys, and then if the scroll height, minus the scroll top plus the client height is less than 100, in that case we will make a set timeout function, and that the time will be like 100 seconds, and here we'll just say container ref.current.scroll top, and it should be like container ref.current.scroll height. Basically just wanted to scroll down the new message, right? Now if we hit save for this much part, and now the handle socket function is basically done, and after this we will have subscribe to messages, and then we will pass in the handle socket function, which will be the callback function which we created there, and then return we'll do the unsubscribe from messages and pass in this callback. Now it should be good. Now after that we will have a function called handle scroll to like handle the scroll functionality to load the new messages when scrolled. So within this we will have if the container ref dot current does not exist, in that case basically return alright, and then if container ref exists dot current dot scroll top is the height is less than equals to 50, and there are more messages and the loading state is set to true, in that case fetch messages for the current skip. Alright, that is it. After this we just need another use effect hook, so let's use the use effect snippet here as well, and it will be calling whenever the messages change, like there is a new message or something like that. In that case this use effect will be called. So this is basically if the first load dot current and the messages dot length is like greater than 0, and the container ref dot current exists, in that case we'll set the scroll top to be the scroll height, which is just this, and then we'll just set the first load dot current to be false. This much is fine, we can just reject this, and this written statement as well, it's saved. Now we can just add the basic JSX to render these changes and everything. So first thing, let's give this diff the reference. The reference will be the container reference, and in this we'll add an on scroll event. So on scroll, I want you to call the handle scroll function, and then let's give it some styling. So class name will be padding 4, and then flex, and then flex call, and then overflow auto, overflow y auto instead, and then we'll have a bg gray of 50. Okay, and this is all about the styling, and initially we'll have a style fixed styling for it. So the height is going to be like 400 pixels, and this should be fine. Now within this div, what we are going to do is, if there are no more messages, we should show some text like no more messages at the top, right? So for that, what we are going to do is, if not has more, in that case show this much code, right? In here we can just add a new div. All right, within this we can add no more messages, like this, and let's give it some styling as well. Can remove this much and paste it here. Okay, let's give it some styling so that it comes into like the center, right? So text centered, and then text gray 400, and then text excess, and then margin y to be 2, and then padding y to be 1, something like this. And then we will have for each messages that exists, so messages dot map, and then message comma index. What we are going to do is, we will get a time string first to like have a modified part for us. So let's get a time str, an empty string, and after this, if the message dot timestamp exists, in that case what we are going to say, first we will get the date. So const date is equals to new date from message dot timestamp, and then time string, this time string is going to be data. It's not data actually, it's date, and what is the issue here? Alright, we just need to have it like this, and it is alright, fine. Now hour 2 digit, minute 2 digit, it is all good, and after this we will return some code. So we'll have a div. Now this div will have a key. The key will be the ID of the message, message dot underscore ID. Alright, after this so slash div, and within this div we will have our message. So basically let's use a span element, and within the span we will have our msg dot message, and after the span we will have, if the time string exists, In that case, show this time string as well, right? That is what it is. My bad. If the time string exists, show the time string, and we can just change the styling a bit to margin left to 3, and then text size small, and then text gray 400, and then white space to no wrap. Alright, and for this message as well, we will need to have some styling. So let's give it margin bottom of 2.5, padding of 3, PG white, rounded LG, shadow SM, shadow to be small, and then let's give it flat, the direction using flex, and then items to the start, and then justify between, and then whenever we hover over it, I want the shadow to be visible, so shadow will be MD, and then transition will be over the shadow, and then the transition duration will be 200. I think this much part is done, and now, alright, I did a small mistake. This styling is actually for this div, and coming to the span, we will just have minute styling, so text gray 800. That should be fine. Now if I see, okay, WebSocket URL is not defined. Now this error is basically coming from socket client. So white WS base URL, can this much, and now you can see the messages are loading. Now we can just add something, one other thing, which will be like a loading state. So what I mean by that is, like, here we can add a loader. So we'll say check if it is still loading. In that case, show something like a text which says loading or something like that. We just say div, and within this div we will have another div which will show loading. That is all, and we can just make it flex and bring it to the center as we need. Currently it will be shown on top in here. Now you can see as we scroll, all the messages load up. If I open this in a new window, just say indigo and then hit enter, this is being added twice. Now to resolve this, what we can do is, but before, you can see indigo is added here as well. It is basically being added twice for things which are coming from the WebSocket. So to handle that issue, there is something we can do. Like, it is basically being stored in this messages. Now because it is already there once, we are basically adding it twice. So to fix that issue, what we can do is we can change something in the handle WebSocket function. Now, where is it? We have it here, right? So first we need to check if it exists there or not. So how do we check that? So let's modify the set messages functionality, right? Let's remove this much, and in here let's use this. if exists, in that case we will return only the priv. Now what exists does, I'll explain, but before that, if it does not exist, in that case return this. That is what I want to say. Let's reject this. Now let's find what exists is. So we'll just say something like const exists and previous dot sum. Get that message. If message, so as there was a minor fix in this exists, so previously this was not being added, so you can now clearly check this and check in your code as well. Now it's working just perfect. So you can see I will add some, let's say, beach and hit send. You will see beach is added here. It is also added here. Now that's all for this chat application. So anyone will send in messages, we can scroll them, everything, and they will load via infinite scrolling, or you can say pagination. And that is how it is basically working. So that is all for this episode. I hope you learned something new in a better and efficient way. So if you have any queries, please drop in the comments below. I'll be happy to help. And that's all from my side for this episode. I'll meet you soon. Until then, bye bye.